Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We will be getting started in just a few minutes. If you can bear with us, please. Okay, good. All right, Dyron, are we ready to go?
Yes, participants are getting, so we have 20 in the room.
Okay, all right. All right, maybe we can give it just a few minutes more.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's sub-regional consultation meeting for the Caribbean on the UNESCO Open Educational Resources Recommendation and the Third World OER Congress. My name is Paul Hector. Uh, we will start perhaps in another 2 minutes. We'll just give, a few more participants a little bit more time to be here for the start of today's session. Thank you. Well, we're now 2 minutes past the start time. We'll give just 1 minute more, and then we will begin today's session. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's sub-regional consultation meeting for the Caribbean on the UNESCO Open Educational Resources Recommendation and the Third World OER Congress. My name is Paul Hector. I am the advisor for communication and information in UNESCO's Office for the Caribbean in Kingston, Jamaica. I will be your moderator for today's consultation meeting. Please note, first of all, that our meeting is supported by simultaneous interpretation in English, French, and Spanish. You may select your preferred language by clicking on the globe-shaped icon to the bottom right of your screen. And if your bandwidth allows, we request that you turn on your cameras so that we can all see each other. And this, of course, enhances a sort of sense of community and being together. Please also note that today's session is being recorded. And so by participating, I think you implicitly agree to having your images and also your speech and anything you type into the chat being part of the record of today's meeting. Now, today's consultation is a collaborative endeavor. It is being organized by UNESCO's offices, which cover the Caribbean, and these 3 offices are located in Havana, Kingston, and Port-au-Prince. And we, of course, have our UNESCO headquarters team with us. We are, of course, very grateful for the support of our partners, who you will get to hear from during the course of today's event, as well as the various regional and national bodies who will be sharing experiences in the use of OERs from the region. We look forward, of course, to the questions and the insights that you, our participants, will bring. These contributions are truly crucial to the success of today's event and, of course, the success of the World OER Congress. Now, this event brings together the Dutch, English, French, and Spanish-speaking Caribbean, and it's one of several global preparatory events being organized for the 3rd UNESCO World OER Congress. This Congress is being organized under the theme, Digital Public Goods, Open Solutions for Inclusive Access to Knowledge. The Congress will be taking place from 19th to 21 November 2024 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So just to recap, the aims of today's consultation are firstly to share best practices and innovations in the implementation of UNESCO's 2019 recommendation on OER. Secondly, to share the recently launched series of briefs on the implementation guidelines for the OER recommendation. And thirdly, to present and discuss the draft outcome document for the 3rd World OER Congress that will focus on how we can practically ensure that the 2019 recommendation on OER can optimize openly licensed content to address the challenges and also the opportunities posed by the emergence of new technologies. So your thoughts, your inputs, these are certainly crucial, and these will, of course, be integrated into the outcome document that will be developed for the 3rd UNESCO World OER Congress. I should also like to mention that beyond the World OER Congress, today's event is also very much linked to other regional action plans and initiatives. For example, OER is very much supportive of the United Nations Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation and its effort to improve the development of digital public goods. Now let's move into the agenda which we have for today. And I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Anna Paolini, who will be giving welcoming remarks and starting off the event. Now, Dr. Anna Paolini has been the director and UNESCO representative in the UNESCO Office for the Caribbean, located here in Kingston, Jamaica, since June 2022. In this role, she oversees the implementation of UNESCO's programs in 20 Dutch and English-speaking countries. Dr. Paolini, of course, brings a tremendous wealth of global experience based on extensive service in the Arab states, Asia, Europe, and now, of course, the Caribbean. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Paolini. Anna, you have the floor. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I hope you can hear me well for this very flattering introduction. So, good morning, bonjour, buen dia to everybody online. So, dear representative of the Caribbean member states, and of course, associate states, and representative of international organization and regional organization, national commissions online with us, panelists and experts, colleagues in Paris and in the 3 offices, and ladies and gentlemen, really it's an honor to be with you this morning from Kingston, as my colleague Paul said, but on behalf of 3 offices, our office in Havana, that covers Santo Domingo, Havana, and Venezuela, and as well our colleague in Haiti. So as we convene both in person and virtually to today's consultation meeting, I wish to extend my deep well wishes, especially for the safety of all participants in this region and also their family and loved ones, in particular in light of the recent events and recent challenges that we faced and that was posed by the passage of Hurricane Beryl very early in the region that left death and destruction behind us. And of course, we are just at the beginning of the season, so wishing well to all of you. Our resilience, of course, in the face of such adversity and such extreme events, highlight the critical importance really to work together to strengthen our collective efforts and cooperation. And I'm really glad that we convene around OER this morning. This meeting is strategically convened, as I said, by the three offices and of course our colleague in headquarters, and mark a significant step toward the third UNESCO World OER Congress, as my colleague Paul has mentioned. Your deliberation over the coming days are really crucial because they will reflect the specific needs and aspiration of the Caribbean small island development states and will shape our contribution to a more inclusive and accessible global knowledge society. As we prepare for the OER Congress under the theme Digital Public Goods, Open Solution for an Increasing, inclusive access to knowledge, let us reaffirm our commitment to the principle laid out in the UNESCO recommendation to OER. This instrument is more than a policy paper, that gives policy directive. It is really a call for action, for really have open access, reuse, adaptation, and redistribution of educational resources. This is really essential for achieving inclusive and equitable quality education worldwide. And we know how much is needed, especially in the region where we stand, where access, to resources sometimes is limited given the small size of our countries. So our efforts realign definitely with the broader goal, as Paul has mentioned, of the United Nations General Roadmap for Digital Cooperation. But I would like to remind you that we just concluded a month ago our Seeds 4 conference in Antigua and Barbuda, and that brought together all the Seeds country and all the member states of the UN around the table, talking about the future and what this country needs as an urgent thing. And the final document, which is called ABAS, strengthen and put really big emphasis on the digital transformation that these countries are aspiring. And I would just like to quote two in particular of the outcomes of this document, just to remind us where we are and what are the aspirations already of these member states. So the request is really to assist Seeds in developing national roadmaps for digitalization, science and technology and innovation, and support small island development states to build up national capacity for developing and utilize state-of-the-art technology. Assisting the development of policy and legislation to create an enabling environment to boost digital transformation, innovation, enhance digital infrastructure and connectivity, bridge the digital divide, enhance digital skills, support government digital services and digital public infrastructure. So this is really an aspiration of this region that we should keep really on the back of our mind, and especially of the participants while deliberating during the following day. So please, if you are not familiar with this document, it's available on the SDG site of the UN. So through this initiative, we really aim to enhance digital cooperation and foster the creation of a digital public goods, ensuring that educational resources become the cornerstone of sustainable development, particularly in regions that are vulnerable as to be disrupted. And we know that hurricane just passed, and with loss of lives and a lot of damages, but also other disasters. We know we are earthquake prone region, and as well, we have issues about flooding and so on. So it's really an issue here. So I wanted, this be kept within the overall thinking. I extend my appreciation, of course, to all the expert and panelists that are participating today. I would like to give a special thanks to our regional bodies, such as the Organization of American States, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the University of the West Indies, which are really strong partners to UNESCO. Your insight, of course, contribution, and at the end, collective cooperation are invaluable to advancing OER and all in all sustainable development and the well-being of our region. I finally would like to thank, of course, the national and governmental actors, all our national commission who has supported this initiative. And of course, your commitment to advance OER not only strengthen our educational framework, but also fortify our community against future challenges. So as we, proceed, and has been already very long, but I think it's an important consultation that we are having ahead of us. Let's continue to champion the transformative power of education and as well as digital, collaboration and transformation. Together, we can co-create knowledge that address our current needs and anticipate and mitigate future challenges, ensuring, after all, the prosperity and well-being of all our region and also beyond. So thank you very much. I wish you all really a very good day, a very productive way, and looking forward to your deliberation to be heard during the Global OER Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you for making everyone feel, I'm sure, very, very welcome and also very inspired to participate in today's event. And also reminding us of the importance of the work that we're doing to the bigger overarching goals, sustainable futures for small island developing states, digital transformation, and of course, enabling vulnerable regions like ours to become more resilient. So thank you again. So now we move on to the second aspect of our agenda. And here we'll be looking at the 2019 recommendation on OER, which of course is a normative instrument developed by UNESCO with the support and adopted by its member states. And we'll also be talking a bit about the third World OER Congress. And to do that, we have with us none other than Ms. Zeynep Vargalo. And Zeynep is a program specialist in the Digital Innovation and Transformation section of UNESCO's Communication Information Sector, based in our headquarters in Paris. Really, Zeynep is the person who is driving all of these initiatives globally around OER. She is also a member of, she also leads the OER Dynamic Coalition. She works also on the UNESCO ICT Competency Framework for Teachers and also other initiatives in the areas of open distance and flexible online education. Now, without any further ado, I pass the floor to Zeynep to tell us more about all of these exciting areas that she is covering. Thank you, Zeynep. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for such a nice introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Just take me 1 minute. Okay, sure. Do you see my screen? Yes?
Yes, we're seeing your screen.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And today I'm going to speak to you about the upcoming event and the recommendations, as you mentioned. So the objectives of this, as Dr. Polini has pointed out, the objectives of this session are to share best practices, to talk about the implementation guidelines, and of course to present the outcome document. The idea here is to prepare for the Third World OER Congress, and ensure that it's in alignment with the regional needs. And it also showcases the important work that's being done in the region. Now, this is the main point of what we're talking about, why we're all here together. There is a normative instrument. It's a UN normative instrument, the Recommendation on Open Educational Resources. It was adopted in November 2019, and it is the only UN normative instrument in technologies and education. And it's also the only one that's on openly licensed educational content. And it's available on the UNESCO website. I would like to give you a very cool, easy address to go to, but actually the easiest way to find it is to type legal instruments recommendation OER, and you'll find it through Google. It's probably the fastest way. So what is this instrument? What's interesting about this is that we have a very clear definition of what we're talking about and what we're not. So the definition is that OER are teaching and learning and research materials on any medium. So it could be online, it could be on paper, it could be a video, whatever, but that reside in the public domain under a copyright that allows, that's an open license, that's under an open license that allows for it to be accessed, reused, repurposed, adapted, and redistributed at no cost. And we also have a definition of open license, and it refers to a license which respects intellectual property rights and also grants the user the rights to access, reuse, repurpose, adapt, and redistribute. Now, what it isn't, what we're not talking about here, just to be very clear, because sometimes there's some confusion. If you see a site that says free resources, but you don't see an open license, that's not an open educational resource. Unless it's on an open license, and the most common open licenses are Creative Commons licenses, it is not an open resource. You do not have the legal right to repurpose it, adapt it, or redistribute it accordingly. And just one other point about copyright. If you don't see a copyright, it means that it's actually copyrighted, because in copyright law, the default is that materials that are not explicitly openly licensed are actually fully copyrighted. What's also interesting about this this recommendation is that who it's the stakeholders. As you can see on the screen, it's a huge list. It's like this big, and you have the traditional educational community. You also have the cultural community, so libraries, archives, museums. And then you have communication and technology professionals, intergovernmental organizations, broadcasting groups. And what the main thread through all of this is the knowledge community. It's about sharing knowledge on an open license. The recommendation, as this is the cheat sheet to the recommendation, there are 5 action areas. It's a very, very reader-friendly, user-friendly recommendation. I would really invite you to go and read it, because it's really straightforward. It's only about 10 pages. And it's got 5 main areas. The first one is capacity building. It's about ensuring that stakeholders understand the added value, they're aware of the added value of using open educational resources, that they have the skills in order to create, access, reuse, redistribute OER. There's a section on openly licensed tools and platforms to make sure that they're conducive to easily sharing OER. And then related to this, a discussion on metadata interoperability. In the policy section, the first part is about the principle that if educational resources are developed with public resources, that they should logically be available on an open license, since the taxpayer would have already paid for them logically. And then there's discussion on guidelines and standards, incentives to stimulate the use and reuse and basically the distribution of quality OER, and incentives for professionals also to be involved in this area. And then there's a discussion on alignment with other open policies. Some of you may have heard of open access to scientific journals, open data, open science, etc. And there's a call in this section to make alignment in policies at the national institutional level that align these different parts. And then there's a part on data protection and privacy issues. The next section is on quality, multilingualism, and inclusiveness. It's about accessibility, ensuring that OER is available in different languages. and also the issue of ensuring that the quality of OER is the same, if not better, than copyrighted materials. Sustainability, we can summarize in the principle that the teacher and the user shouldn't bear the burden of the expenses, and different business models in which this can be done, and also incentives for stakeholders to continue to develop the OER ecosystem. International cooperation is about cooperation between different institutions, stakeholders, levels of different kinds of stakeholders working together, and cooperation in order to build together the different parts of the OER ecosystem. We have put together the OER Dynamic Coalition in March 2020, and it basically brings together the first 4 areas that I spoke about, and it talks about ways to how we use this to promote collaboration between different stakeholders and cooperation on different projects and sharing information on different projects. There are monthly updates. There's a DC portal which is being developed, and there are joint projects that have been initiated in this regard. We'll put into the chat the link. If you'd like to join the OER Dynamic Coalition, you're most welcome. It's a large community. We have almost 600 people worldwide involved. It's a UNESCO Dynamic Coalition, and it's part of the Internet Governance Forum. So there's a multi-stakeholder aspect to it. And it's a great way to know what's happening globally and have more information on different activities, and to share your information on what you're doing if you have a new publication or if you have a conference that you want to talk about, just to get the community to know about the important work that you're doing also. The added value of this is of this instrument, and the reason we're here and the reason we're making so much noise is that it's an international framework agreed upon by 193 member states, and it's a sustainable ecosystem. It puts together the components of a sustainable ecosystem that looks at content, policy, platforms, in order to continue the development and creation of knowledge and sharing of this knowledge. Now, as it's a UNESCO OER dynamic, as it's a UNESCO instrument, we are obliged every 4 years to do a survey on its implementation. And the last survey was done last year in 2023, and we had 70, almost 80 countries, I think 78 or 80 countries worldwide that responded. Of those, we had 6 reports from the Caribbean region. And in view of the number of countries in the Caribbean region, this is quite substantial. On the screen, you'll see the breakdown of the different inputs that we had. We did not have a lot of responses from the Latin America Caribbean region altogether. We counted according to UNESCO regions, so Caribbean is part of the Latin American region in this calculation. As you can see, what's interesting on the slide here is that it's true that there's a lot of work being done in Europe and North America, but in fact, there's more overall work being done globally. And I think this is something which is really quite substantial. On the screen, you have the countries which did send in their reports before the deadline of exactly 1 year ago. Wow, exactly 1 year ago last year, I didn't realize. Here you have, on this slide, you have basically the information on the responses we had. So of the responses, quite a few had done awareness raising, quite a few had done capacity building. Of the countries that reported back, there are national repositories having capacity building resource. Half of them had capacity building interventions which focused on repositories. And this is the first part of the recommendation. In terms of policy, 33% had policies that foresee the principle I just said about public funds being used for educational materials, which in turn become OER. 33% had worked in this area in some degree or another. No respondents spoke about national policy work frameworks aligned to other open policies, so this could be perhaps something that would be interesting to look at. And 16% spoke about policies and principles with regard to privacy and data protection. Now, this was a year ago, so perhaps this is, of course, evolved and more countries have done more work, but this is the data that we have. In terms of inclusive and equitable access to quality OER, 66% said that they had it in national languages. I realize the national language often is actually English or Spanish or French, so it's this is an issue. But Carasso said that they had it in there's a spelling mistake. Papimento. There 50% had OER available on low connectivity or offline context. I'm sorry, here too is a mistake. And it's contextualized to social and economic context. 50% had worked in the area of quality assurance criteria in this regard. And some research and studies in this area has been done. In terms of sustainability models, again, this was 16%, but just to let you know, overall, globally, this was kind of at the same level as other continents and other regions. There hasn't been a lot of work done in sustainability globally, and this is an area that really needs more work overall. In terms of specificities, there was one country responded that they had worked in OER to meet the challenges, and globally, 28% of the respondents reported the existence of specific clauses being incorporated into international agreements. And this is a global figure, so Dominican Republic and Ecuador, it was highlighted, are both part of an international agreement that brings together 11 countries in this regard. So this gives you an idea of the information that was given a year ago, exactly 1 year ago, on OER. What would be interesting is to see at the end, the Director General invited countries that had not responded to this questionnaire to do so. So we would invite you to respond to the questionnaire, and we'll get back to you more on how this can be done. But this will be one of the points that will be discussed at the Third World OER Congress, and it's to share best practices and innovations in the implementation of this instrument, and then talk about how we can support the implementation of the instrument in terms of meeting emerging challenges and opportunities posed by AI and emerging technologies such as blockchain. There is a discussion about the establishment of a global observatory, amongst other areas. And also to look at collaborative mechanisms to get stakeholders to work together to implement the recommendation with a view to making to supporting the Global Digital Compact, and which is part of the discussions of the Transforming Education Summit. So these are UN mechanisms. One of the expected outcomes of this is to have guidelines on how the recommendation can meet the new challenges posed by emerging technologies such as AI and blockchain, which are not also great opportunities, but to see how this instrument can adapt to the new developments. It's, I'm sorry, here we changed this since the last slide. It's 19th to 20th of November. It will be in Dubai. And the host will be the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation. And we're expecting some 350 to 500 participants. Now, part of the discussions, and even in the title, as you noticed, it's about digital public goods. And this is something that was brought up by the UN Secretary General during just when COVID happened. And it talks about being open source software, open data, etc., and open content that adheres to privacy and other applicable international domestic standards, best practices, and does no harm. We're referring to this document, which my colleague Javiera will speak to further. It's the Global Digital Roadmap for Digital Cooperation. And within this, the Secretary General has identified that one of our challenges as a planet will be to improve digital cooperation and have a digital commons as a global public good. So the idea that it's built on the idea of knowledge societies and the idea that we have to share knowledge and we have to have it as a global common in order for us to advance as the planet. And that is my presentation. So if you have some questions, I think we have a question period after, but maybe I will give the floor back to Paul. Paul.
All right. No, thank you very much, Zainab. That was really lovely. I mean, the way you brought together all of the various dimensions, the recommendation, how it links in, of course, to knowledge, data. As we know today, the primary source of value creation, it's coming from things like data, information, and knowledge. So again, all this work on OERs, this is really central to building knowledge capacity, building human capacity. So really quite excellent. What we'll do is I'd like us to hear from Javiera. And Javiera will talk a little bit about the draft outcome document from the third, that will inform the third World OER Congress. And following her presentation, we'll have an opportunity to reflect and discuss both things which are included in Javiera's presentation, as well as any comments that you may have with respect to Zainab's intervention. What I'd like you to do is just to make sure that we don't lose any questions that you have. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. If you click on that, you can just type into the chat. So that way we have your questions, we don't forget anything. And of course, by typing it in, we of course make it a record of this whole event. So let me just say before, just give a little brief introduction to Javiera. So Dr. Javiera Atenas, she's a senior lecturer in learning and teaching and enhancement, and she leads the postgraduate certificate in academic practice at the University of Suffolk. And one of the areas in which she does a lot of work is actually data visualization for social scientists. So again, we see here the key linkages. Over the last few years, she has been focusing on developing critical data literacies among academics and supporting, of course, institutions in developing open education and science policies. So let's all welcome Javiera. Javiera, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleague. Thank you very much, Paul and UNESCO colleagues. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Merci pour votre invitation. I will be sharing my screen, and unfortunately, I will be speaking in English, but if anyone wants to address any questions afterwards in Spanish, I will be more than happy to take them. Let me open my presentation for a second, because of course, my computer is playing games at me. One of the interesting things that in my work with Zainab and with the coalition is to try to look for links and understanding. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we are seeing your presentation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Is to understand how the concept and the idea of digital public goods and other frameworks have an impact on the implementation on the OER recommendation OER. Because if in a way or another, the landscape has changed post-COVID and in the Gen AI times that we're living, the way that we are shaping OER and the OER agenda is being shaped has changed. And the idea of digital public goods as a common denominator and a common practice sounds quite interesting, and it's something that as an open practice community, we should all be addressing. The idea of digital public goods is simply open accessible assets that have universal access. The idea of universal access is also mentioned in the definition for open data, for example. So we're joining different definitions and different ideas into the digital commons, the global digital compact, but also a roadmap for digital cooperation. And I think this is key for making different open agendas progress, but most of all to promote the ethos and the values of open education and open educational resources. We need to address issues such as data privacy, internet governance, data governance, shared resources, collective management, and equitable access and infrastructure for digital content. Otherwise, we're going to be amplifying, widening up the gap in terms of access to information that we currently have. If we look and we map against the idea of OER against the idea of like digital public goods and the UNESCO OER recommendation, we need to think about developing a commitment for OER in terms of like universal access and sharing knowledge and sharing information through OER. Also, we need to think about elements of the UN SDG Commons agenda, so advocating for shared digital resources and collaborative management system that resonates with the idea of the digital commons. And there are two key elements in here, and in terms of the SDG agenda commitments. First is improve digital cooperation, which is key. But the key value, the key element is actually commitment number one: leave no one behind. We don't want to live in a society with these knowledge gaps keep widening and widening. In terms of how we contribute and how we can contribute to the achievement of SDG 4, so education 4, and the UN Commons agenda, so leave no one behind, in terms of the UNESCO recommendations, how we kind of cross-ref all of these frameworks. First, we need to think about investing in training programs to help educators to use emerging technologies such as AI in a responsible way. We have plenty of frameworks and plenty of information and development. It's also now in terms of legality and legal frameworks to understand what are the risks and the benefits and the challenges of using artificial intelligence. So the idea of framing everything under the core concept of responsibility, including understanding intellectual property, is important for enabling educators to use and to develop OER supported by AI and other emerging technologies in a responsible manner. When we look at what's kind of calling back from what Zeynep was talking when she showed the panorama of policies and the panorama of adoption of OER around the world, the development of supportive policy is in early stages. So more and more countries will have to start developing policies around open education and open educational resources. But these policies need to address elements that are related to the digital public goods in terms of fostering a culture of openness with a change of cultural practices, but also collaboration amongst institutional educations and other key stakeholders in education that promote inclusive access. And that includes ensure not just equitable access in terms of disability, cultural awareness, but also a robust technological infrastructure that we're currently lacking, addressing issues like data governance to make sure that intellectual property is protected in those robust technological infrastructures, but also data and subject data is protected. But also we need to think a bit further down the line nowadays in terms of AI and blockchain, for example, because we also need to consider the impact of those technologies in the environment. So developing green and environmental computing solutions is quite important. And that also meets the targets for sustainability models in terms of that our infrastructure are secure, protect the people, are transparent in terms of also governance and infrastructure, but also sustainable in terms of environment. And in order to achieve all of this, we require international cooperation. No country can do so in isolation. We cannot develop supportive policies if we don't collaborate with other countries. We cannot provide capacity if we don't learn from other countries. Inclusive access needs to ensure that everyone, anywhere, can access OER in a very sustainable way. So if we look in terms of key framework, and this is a bit drawing from the ROMX framework for practice, we need to think about 5 key elements, which is rights, including privacy rights, data security, intellectual property, and access and right to access to education. We need to think of openness in a way to promote OER, to foster a culture of collaboration, as, for example, the open science world does, and the open data world does. Sharing is also collaboration. Sharing in isolation doesn't work. And there is a key element in here. We need to think about accessibility. We need to make sure that OER and any learning and teaching material that we produce under this digital public goods framework has to do with inclusivity. All learners, regardless of their socioeconomic background, not just disability, but also cultural awareness, need to be allowed and facilitated access to knowledge. And to understand who needs what and how it's needed. It's multi-key stakeholder participation is key, because we need to engage with governments, we need to engage with educational institutions, with private sector, but also with the civil society in terms of developing and disseminating OER. And if we think on how the world works today, and we think about the educational sector, and this is quite important because education is actually a very gendered profession, teachers, we need to consider that there are cross-cutting indicators that need to support women's empowerment and gender equality in terms of how people is portrayed in the OER, promote children's safety and mitigate environmental impact. I think these are key elements when we try to think about how we're going to frame OER in the next 10, 20, 30 years. What we're going to try to open here is a space for discussion when we think about what are the challenges and what are the key elements that we need to think about when framing OER. In terms of, for example, the ROMEX indicators and the digital commons and digital public goods. What are the challenges for OER currently? Where are the OERs? What the OERs portray? Who's making them? If we are developing with AI, because we are developing OER with AI, do we have any standard to ensure that we are developing responsibly? Do we have a collective management of AI tools for education? What are the ethical principles that we're using when we are developing OER with AI or embedding OER in blockchain platforms? How we promote responsible AI principles in the deployment and the development of OER and the development of efficient blockchain solutions? How do we advocate as a community of educators for sustainable digital practices, green computing? How we advocate for open internet standards and promote sharing, a culture of collaboration. And it's quite important here that also we aim to protect the intellectual rights of the authors. And we improve our collective governance of intellectual property and copyright in a time of AI. So we need to start thinking about how we're going to collectively develop guidelines for intellectual property protection and licensing, and also advocate for fair and open licensing practices. So we need to aim at addressing the current digital divide, which is wider than sometimes we can see. So promote universal access to AI and universal access to OER. Ensure inclusive access to digital resources, which is the main idea, the ethos of digital public goods. Focuses on digital inclusion and equitable access, but also ensure that we're bridging as well elements of digital connectivity. Who cannot participate because they don't have access to the network? So in our call for action, we propose a series of ideas or suggestions in terms of collective practices in education for open education. So develop AI approaches that for equitable OER, promote sustainable licensing models, as all the open movements have been doing. So we need to look into how open data and how open government is managing licenses as well. But we need to ensure that OER is accessible for vulnerable communities, including people with disabilities, including people in rural areas, and also displaced communities. And there is a key point that comes from indigenous knowledge, and this is, I think, very important for the Caribbean and Latin American communities. How we're going to ensure that we respect indigenous knowledge in the production of OER, that's cultural awareness. This needs to be embedded in the processes of developing capacity building programs. The environment is important. The impact, including the impact of emerging technologies is quite big in terms of energy consumption. So we need to think about how we're going to promote environmental sustainable practices when developing digital public goods to reduce energy consumption and mitigate elements of our carbon footprint. How are we going to strengthen our international efforts for collaboration in terms of developing OER and emerging technologies, considering frameworks such as responsible AI or ethics of AI, ensuring copyright compliance, and also support educations to advance the learning in this journey. Ensure that the stakeholders understand open licenses, not just the educators, but also the stakeholders in the educational sector. We need to make sure that people understand what open licensing is, what copyright is, and what data protection legal frameworks are. Because all this brings new challenges in terms of emerging technologies. We need to recognize the role of OER in achieving the SDGs, and mostly SDG 4, but they're all the elements that it addresses. Recognize the OER in developing responsible, the value of the communities in developing responsible AI and data governance frameworks. We need to start governing our own network, our own spaces, but we need to do it in a responsible way. So in a way or another, we need to think about how we're going to integrate responsible AI principles into OER development in terms of policy, in terms of guidelines, in terms of capacity building, to ensure that no one is left behind. So yeah, this is the work that we've been doing. Of course, open for discussions. If you have any questions, just let me know. Also, Zainab know. But here's a list of readings that you might like to adopt to understand where all these ideas come from. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Wow, thank you so much, Javiera. This is, I think, really wonderful. I think you've really, woven and shown how OER links not only with education, but a whole range of contemporary issues around which are really crucial to inclusive and peaceful development, sustainability, carbon footprint. So really a lot of things for us to think about. I see we have something like 70 participants online, and I'm really looking forward to receiving questions from you, questions that you may have for Javiera. As she's so very richly outlined, these are the sort of issues at stake. These are the things that we need to talk about. I have one. I see so far we have. Let's see. There was one. We had a question regarding the sharing of the consultation question. There's been an answer to that one. There's a second question. Do you know about a written proposal to guarantee collective authorship and collective recognition for indigenous communities, considering that their knowledge is consolidated over generations? Yes. This is coming from a question from Claudia Wenderly in Brazil. Yes.
Thank you.
And
Javiera,
before you answer, as I mentioned before, Zainab, please also, you're also part of this Q&A session. Eleanor, and I encourage everyone, put your questions in the chat. Yes.